Hey, welcome back. It's another episode of Culture Club Half Hour, in which two of the four members of Culture Club get together for 30 minutes to talk about what's new. Me and Jeff today. Jeff, how are you?
Good man. How are you? It's a sunny day where I am. I'm feeling good.
It's a sunny day here in New York too. I think we're going to be in the mid 60s. It feels like spring is showing up for just long enough to disappoint us again with another inevitable cold snap. I don't think it's
Right.
quite time to put away the Ugg boots, although I could be wrong.
I mean, here we had a colder winter than usual, a lot of people would say. So yeah, I'm happier
Do you
coming
have
out
to
of
put on
bed.
the long sleeves at some point? Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
funny,
you're
man.
right.
Like the one thing I tell people about Miami is like when there is a cold day, people put on like the biggest Patagonia Montclair puffers. That's like when you know, all the moms pull out the Montclair puffers. It's
Yeah, I
kind of
mean, I
fun.
think there's probably, I was thinking about this actually. There's a business in the revival of the Farmer's Almanac as a predictor for temperature swings that require like that one key piece. I mean, we should go to Ruba with this and say, hey, let's get into the,
Right.
the astrolabe and
How
figure out
How
where
were they
where
so accurate? Were they accurate? Was the Farmer's Almanac actually accurate on weather?
well, I don't think so, but I don't think modern weather is terribly accurate
It doesn't
either.
matter, right?
It's the whole thing. It's sort of like put your finger up and test the wind.
There are so many publications from like the past that we should bring back. What was the whole Earth catalog as an example? I think that's come back a couple times though.
Yeah, I think it probably has. It's funny you should mention that actually. This is a good we can treat this as an idea generation laboratory or brand resurrector. So I was talking yesterday to a guy who listens to the pod and he was telling me that one of the things he wants to try to do is work with and then potentially acquire a brand. And as we went on further, he was talking more in the media kind of space, but for whatever reason, my head went immediately to like consumer brands, and let's call it sportswear in particular. And I was saying to him, we were talking about English football, and I was saying to him, like Patrick, for instance, would be a brand that would be really interesting to
Patrick,
revive. You
sure.
know,
Right, right,
you know
right.
Patrick. Well, he didn't, and it made me. He's a younger guy than we are. Probably by 15 years or so, and he didn't know it, despite knowing a good deal about football and having spent time around football culture. And I was just thinking, I was just like, I wonder what the cutoff point is, and I wonder at what point we could go back and find the brands of the past to resurrect.
I'm obsessed with the brands that have figured out how to reboot themselves essentially every 8 years. And those are
Okay,
brands that
give an example. What do you think?
I always use like this is not fashion brand, but it's an IP. So like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they
Okay,
constantly
gotcha,
come
sure.
back every 8 years because there's an evergreen kid or family and there's
Sure.
almost like a generational thing where like a young kid and his dad and his mom will kind of revisit the whole thing, which is cool. The other
Yeah.
side of it are the brands that haven't been able to do that. And we've seen a couple try, like Ponies try a few times in the US.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? But in terms of like reviving these brands, I think that's a fun opportunity. In case unless it goes to sorry, but this in the hands, I think of somebody that wants to treat it like the brand should be treated rather than treated just as IP, it be part of a bigger group where they're
Right.
licensing and wholesaling it out. So
Yeah.
that's sort of what I do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Uh our mutual friend Barney Waters back at K Swiss and in the
Right.
process of looking at how under their new ownership they bring K Swiss back. I got served an ad the other day for a bag from a brand called Etonic, which was
Sure.
Etonik. So it's not the
Okay.
Etonic, not
Okay.
the Etonic of our youth, but it made me think of Etonic as a the brand of our youth, the sportswear footwear brand of our youth, and what has happened to them because we haven't seen anything from them in a while. Um,
There's
uh,
still, I just pulled up the page. The E-Tonic is still there.
with the
They've
C.
got they've got some they've got some pretty recent what I call lifestyle shops.
Interesting.
And But it always comes down to one thing, Ben. It always comes down to like what stories you can tell how you did in front of rare people, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
what your marketing is to get those stories told. So I don't know.
Well,
Interestingly enough, I'm going to spend some time here later and maybe pick up a few things because it kind of look
yeah,
dope.
yeah. Well, I mean, right, and what's your way back, right? Like, what
Right.
is did Etonic adopt the Central Eastern European strategy where they're going to grow from Slovenia out or something? I'm making that up, obviously, but
I
like
get it.
all of the different ways that you can have these brands go to market and build heat at the moment is interesting. But yeah, I think Etonic, Patrick, is it Avia or how do you see that
Is it
brand?
Avia? Is it Avia? I don't know. They're
I
all
think it's Avia, but anyway.
they're all out there. I mean, if you kind of put an idea, another idea would be fun. Like, why doesn't somebody just open a store and put all these old sports brands in there and just
Yeah,
treat it like that?
I mean, it's funny. There's an aggregator called Classic Football Shirts that
Sure.
bring like dead stock, old stuff, game worn jerseys, things like essentially memorabilia, but memorabilia as fashion, and it feels like a similar sort of thing. And then I think they do some contract manufacturing as well. So it's like you get into it and you go, all right, we're gonna have our circa 1988 sportswear store that has Etonic, Le Coq Sportif, uh, Avia,
Sergio
yeah,
Tacchini, who's still out there,
Sergio Tacchini.
you
Oh my
know.
god.
I mean, those
Um,
brands are like legacy, very European centric sportswear brands that were just massive identifiers from football fans to others. It's just interesting. Is that nostalgia still here? I think so. This has to be put in front of Gen Z in a different way.
yeah, well, it makes you wonder to what extent. I just came from breakfast and I ran into friend of the show, Richie Cruz,
Oh, cool.
who
Shout
was
out Richie
having
Cruz.
yeah, shout out Richie Cruz. But Richie was having lunch with a friend of his, also of Puerto Rican descent, and he had brought a pair of the Nike Air Max Ones helados, which are the yearly release inspired by Puerto Rican culture. This one was inspired by ices in Bushwick, apparently. But so pastel colors, like jewel tones, really like nice looking shoe, and and with a great box and stuff. And I was just like, man, he was like, yeah, they're last year's. I had never seen them, and I was just like, I wonder to what extent the articles that have been coming out this week about sneaker culture being dead
Right.
are true, and so consequently, the kids then look for something that is truly stands apart. So it's
Or the
rather than
or
getting the Panda Dunk because you have to, you're getting the Etonic because it's different, or whatever
which
the case may
sold, by
be.
the way, the Panda Dunk was an insane success. You got to give it for a colorway to work that well, even though it's been oversaturated. I'm not surprised you haven't seen it, Ben. It's not, quite frankly, it's an issue of what's out there. There's just so
Yeah,
many stories, so many shoes coming out, and it's not necessarily like it was, 20 years ago when you had a drop, maybe you had some time, you could talk about it. It's just a different place. So
right.
getting those stories to front, I think is going to be an interesting challenge for a lot of those brands. But one of the stories that I think we touched upon on old sportswear brands, the death of, or at least the so-called death of footwear, is a story that came in the New York Times this week about Gen Z's, the Gen Z makeover that's being given to the military surplus right now. I don't know if you caught that story.
Yeah. So I saw the story and am linking it in the newsletter tomorrow, in the sick newsletter tomorrow. But no, let's talk about that one because I think it's
Yeah.
the idea of the makeover was the part that I thought was interesting.
Well, I think it's so for those that are not familiar, military surplus are surplus excesses that come from various military organizations around the world, and it gets traded. It was traded very heavily, especially after World War II. What's interesting is that the United States we had an incredible number of military surplus stores all over the United States where people could get everything from basics like Dickies and socks and Levi's, quite frankly, and they always had like overstocked military jackets. Maybe it was a U.S. Army jacket or
Right.
a West German Flecktarn jacket. Long story short, these things were very, they're very strong, but the military surplus is sort of, those stores are starting to close. I did a series for High Snob and Alpha Industries years ago where we actually toured what I consider to be some of the very best military stores. And unfortunately, one of those stores up in Portland actually closed. It'd been there forever. So to see
Portland,
this,
Oregon, or Portland, Maine?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay, yeah.
And so what's interesting is that I've always been a fan of military surplus or military in general. I know you have, and most people are, and we see it in fashion all the time. It's really cool to see a bunch of guys in the middle of COVID begin to build a new business. So, taking it online. In many ways, Army Navy stores were kind of, well, I don't know if stodgy is the right word. It's probably not the right word, but they were a little bit like, a little bit stuffy in there,
Yeah.
old, and everything there was ancient, which I love. That's why I went there.
Yeah, of
hunting.
course.
But these guys are giving it like a TikTok makeover. They're using the tools today that we have in social media to take an old business and really, make something new of it, which I think is dope.
Yeah, it's funny. The thing that struck me, the last interaction I had with like vintage military gear was at Front Street General, the store in Dumbo, Brooklyn, that does like really insane, incredibly well curated vintage stuff, as well as they are a Stan Ray retailer of choice. They make a bunch of their own stuff.
Stan Ray.
They make a bunch of their own stuff in line, and but I came across like a 3L Gore-Tex digi camouflage shell that was as substantial and you could tell would perform as well as anything that a Burton or a Arc'teryx would make. And it reminded me that all of that military stuff is meant to be like innovative performance wear of its time,
sure,
whatever its time
sure.
is. And I think part of the story of Army Navy stores was that it was just like, it was cheap, it was overrun, it was old, not that it was high performing or long lasting or whatever the case is. And as we bring that story back into focus, it becomes more interesting. It helps us get away from, the war of it all into the innovation of it, so to speak.
One of the classes I teach over Maragoni, I constantly use the example, in fact, I actually put on yesterday, of a U.S. Army jacket liner, which has a almost like flow-like stitching on it, which everyone has used. Everyone, in fact, Pharrell in one of the, I don't know if it was the first or second collection, used it on a baton bomber as an example.
And Visvin, it's been a staple of the Visvin line,
and everyone's used the Visvin. Yeah, it's just always there. And I bring it to a class around styling, and I showed them the jacket, and they loved it, blown away. But what I had done first was show them the original Pharrell piece, and I could put the two side by side, and I said, and I'll ask people like, which one's LV, which one's not, and the LV one clearly says LV, but the other one, they're just so surprised that this is available to them. So as inspiration, it's always there.
I would have thought that there would be a pretty substantial difference in terms of the hand, in other words, the way that the garment feels, in terms of, I don't know, stitch count or whatever it is, but it's actually true, right? It's performance innovation gear. Jeff has gone to get us a visual aid here for those of you watching.
Garments, right? So they'll just see them on screen. So checking the stitch count.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Okay,
checking the stitch count is a little more difficult, but here's the action.
I'm just on I'm on my Buzz Rickson. I need to know about the number of stitches per inch.
And for those that are interested, like I literally found this at like on Goodwill for $5. It's from 1972. Anyway, I don't know anyone that's watching the pod right now, do see this pattern as inspiration, and this comes out of a military surplus store. That's where you find this garment, right? And that's where the designers have constantly found it. So I'm just excited to see who Gen Z does with military, the future. That you got us.
Yeah, well, interesting. Speaking of that whole Gen Z military vector, one of the and because we shouted out Stan Ray, who was from Texas. One of the things that I thought was interesting was South by Southwest this year took on the U.S. military, the Army in particular, as a sponsor for the conference, and that caused a bunch of people to back out of their, engagements with South by. It made me wonder about where in this fractured media landscape that we're in, people draw the line for how they want to participate in with whom, right?
Sure.
Like a South by has only so many people that it can take sponsorship dollars from, given the bulk of things going to the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks of the world. by the same token, the military is obviously a complicated association. I don't know. I
Well, let's
wonder
listen.
I wonder where people are drawing lines in the sand these days, given our polarization and stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
I think no. I think that line's quite nuanced for who you are and what you believe in, and
Yeah.
I think maybe it would have been a lot less vocal before social media, but that's where we are today. But look, let's talk about the U.S. Army. They are what they are, but they are also an innovation company. They
Yeah.
spend a lot of money on innovation for defense. That already trickles down into the world. GPS being the biggest one. What would we do if we didn't have GPS today? And at the same token, they are probably there not just to be a brand, but probably to look for, the next level of talent, right? So it's an interesting play for them, but I can see how people would have feelings about it. I don't know if that's my line. I certainly don't think that is my line. There's other lines I may take, but they are nuanced. And listen, everyone has the right to do what they want, right?
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever been down? Speaking of that, I mean, I think I probably fall on the other side of it, which is that I would not want to associate with military stuff in properties that I work on. Not because I don't acknowledge the importance of the military, but just because I believe that that message needs to stand on its own, not be endorsed by some kind of cultural capital or FOMO or whatever the case may be is. But the thing that I wanted to just touch on, and I'm trying to look up now the name of it, but there is in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, there is a company that provides performance fabric.
Oh, I love them. I've been there.
And I was going to ask if you had been, because I have not, and it all seemed
that's shady.
Really exciting. Cry Precision, I think it's called. Now that I'm looking at it.
You're close.
I think it's Cry Precision, maybe, which is CRYE. Let's see here. Sorry. No, we're not. See, you can hear Jeff typing. We're now in our bag where we're looking up stuff on the internet on the podcast. We shouldn't do this.
Listen, we can. That's real life, man. We do this every 30 minutes.
That's true.
Maybe I just need to acquire a keyboard. But anyway, they are a great company.
You do need a quieter keyboard.
Shadi Perez, shout out the great Mr. Perez, brought me there years ago because he knew that I had a love for military, and it's incredible what they do. The fabrics. The great thing about companies like that is that they just it's like over-engineered, and I have there's a very strong place in my heart for over-engineered clothing that's made for lifestyle, right? The greatest example, of course, is like the Hummer driving down the streets of New York, right? But like, it's great.
I suppose. I don't know if I'm tracking with you on that one, Jeff. I mean, over-engineered, I get, right? Like, it's like super function.
Hummers
I love
are
it.
made to be on mountains. They're not made to be on the streets.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
That company.
I think there is
one.
such a thing as overkill in that regard.
And listen, that company is in the Brooklyn Navy Yards. It's a very large operation, and they do supply products to various defense forces from armies, but also police forces and municipalities buy goods like this. So
it's really interesting. So I'm on the Cry Precision site, and the thing that I did not realize is, or it looks anyway, like there is a direct to consumer aspect to this. So it looks like I can just buy a pair of the military
I think they did a Vans collaboration, if I'm not mistaken, either.
Oh, interesting. Speaking of Vans, let's talk about Vans for a minute, because Drika Linkenecht, who's their global CMO, is a friend of the show, friend of ours, very smart and engaged marketer. And Vans, I had a conversation with Chris Gentili at Pilgrim the other day, talking about some of the Vans collabs they've done, and he was just lamenting the fact that they're making great stuff, but it isn't selling at the moment. So Drika's got a real, which has been why they reported it in the VF results and that kind of stuff. So Drika's got a challenge in front of her, which seems sort of insurmountable in a way, but also then you see the thing that they did during Freeze with Sterling Ruby, the giant orange pyramid skate ramp art installation thing, and it was just like, whoa, this. you forget sometimes that like single activation, single moments can really change the
Yeah.
brand's fortune entirely. I was just so impressed by that because the scale of it is so mega.
Right. I
Um,
think a lot of
it
that
was so
comes
cool.
from, if I could be very biased about Vans today,
You can be very
um,
biased about bands.
I'm not actually sure why Vans are not doing as well as they did. We can talk about that. But if I'm looking forward, I'm looking at projects that are trying to touch the zeitgeist or a very
Yeah.
high level of that zeitgeist. We've seen it in Paris even before this last show with Sterling. Vans is trying to place themselves as a core skate brand
Yeah.
and putting themselves within a very high premier level, meaning that they can play on both sides. I think the work that they've done, especially with Sterling Ruby, is really good. I very much like it. It's different. And it goes back towards skate, right? You always see the ramp
Right.
there. And in Paris, you see these fantastical ramps, to be honest. I would say shout out to the team that's working with Drika and certainly guys like Ian Genoza in there who are trying to make moves, move the ball in a way. Those that don't know Ian Genoza, he was a long time member of the Nike Converse family and just did great stuff, incredible
Yeah.
stuff there. So I'm excited to see what he does further here at Vans.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It is funny because it's like I just read at Drika's suggestion. Actually, I read the Paul Van Doren autobiography, which is called Authentic, and it is more of a hagiography, and it was less. I found it to be less informative than I wanted to in terms of sort of the approach to the universe, but it was interesting. In terms of how the company was built and how it made decisions, all of which were done very much on sort of common sense logic and organic decision making, store level insights, that sort of stuff, as opposed to corporate strategy
Right.
or market dynamic analysis or whatever the case
Well, it
is.
was
And
as we
it
started.
feels like that's what they're kind of getting back to maybe a little bit with the Sterling Ruby stuff, and so.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, the best brands, in my opinion, are the brands that at the core have founders or people on the teams that very much believe in the brand. And
Yeah.
as we know, as brands get larger, that construct changes and you start to pull a little bit away from that core, the core visionaries there. But like the great companies, Vans is a company that was, it was family owned for some time. It's clearly not. Now it's part of VF and it's got a very strong core. And that core is their founder, that core is the founding family. And, if they can just keep touching that brand in the most possible they can, closest to that original vision, then I think it'll work. The question is, like, how do you touch the market? Like, how do you get Gen Z to wake up to these things again? I mean, my son wears them, quite frankly, because he finds them to be a performance shoe for him when he's like on a scooter or a skateboard, which is exactly
Interesting.
what that product is, right? But how do you go wider?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a little bit like the military stuff, right? It's like how do you focus attention around the benefit of the innovation outside the oeuvre in which it's originally intended, right? Like
Yeah.
the fact that the shoe is comfortable or durable or low profile and so therefore looks good with baggy pants or whatever it is. It's like he
I
playing
think it's
into
also,
those things.
I also think it's about where you want to show up in media. If we look at
Yeah, for sure.
the EOTW stuff and stuff they've done during Paris Fashion Week, and certainly like that's a very, if I dare say, a premium story, meaning that you wouldn't be surprised if the Vogues of the world picked it up or the Financial Times, because quite frankly, it looked incredible, right? It looked incredible, and it was sort of like the skate ramp in many ways through OTW has become like the new pocket of the next generation of not just skaters, but hopefully leaders of the world, if I dare say that.
Talk about that. What do you mean?
I just think that like so much comes out of skate culture, and so much has come out of skate culture, right? And
Sure.
you can look across the line of all major dezgners at Fashion House. I guarantee you that Kim was on a skateboard. We know he came out of that core.
That's Kim Jones at Dior. Yeah.
Alessandro and Tishi also skated. And they come out of this. That's at least what I remember. If I remember, like he definitely has some.
Interesting.
He definitely has some like hardcore tendencies, if I can say that. So, but, and I could be one of these stated, and I apologize if you didn't, but the point is they were touching culture.
He just showed up at the skate park holding a skateboard.
No, but
Anyway,
they were touching culture on the streets.
Yeah,
And now
for
they
sure.
went to the biggest houses possible, right? And I feel like we're gonna keep pulling the very best out of these creative forces. Either it's the skate ramp we're getting creativity from, or we're getting it from a rock show, if I can use it that way. So the people that show up to these events, while they may look for cool, there's still other people there that are there because they believe Vans has a specific vibe.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't seen, I don't know if you have seen the takedown from, or any takedown from the Sterling Ruby ramp installation, which if you haven't seen, folks, please go and look up. It's Sterling Ruby, the artist, for Freeze Week for Vans, giant installation that was like an enormous oversized public sculpture type thing that was obviously skatable, intended to be skated, but really taken to like the most immense proportions. It though, as an object, is a potential source of iconography, right?
Yeah.
Like the shape of it could be rendered graphically and put on a t-shirt, or could be embroidered into the heel tab of a shoe, or could be replicated in small scale at local skate parks or local activities, or whatever the case is around the world. And I just wonder to what extent it gets used as an icon going forward, because it would be a shame, in my view, for it to just live exclusively in that moment.
You raise a really interesting point. The concept, this is the thing that I find so fascinating about the work with Sterling. You take the concept of what a skate ramp is, right? And now you've kind of taken it away from the half diameter bowl, the half bowl, or a full bowl that people.
Are you trying to say half pipe, Jeff?
No, I'm talking about the bowl, like the old pool. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, sure.
And like you went from that, which in itself is just like a mundane bowl, right? And people skated that, and then evolved into skate ramps. It's not surprising that we're starting to see sort of skatable sculptures, and quite frankly, we should see so much more of that around it. So to your point, I hope, imagine taking that kind of installation everywhere, putting it in cities that, not necessarily have hope, but have a space for it, and we're getting somewhere with culture, right? It's not that different from, I don't know. It's not that different from where sneaker culture came from originally, which was, utilitarian. Then people started to use them for sport, and now they're lifestyle. I don't know. It just feels good to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Alexis Sablon, who is the one of the preeminent female skaters out in the world, has a signature shoe on Converse, but also is an architect. Has by training, cool. Did her graduate degree in architecture, and has designed a bunch of public skate plazas. There's also a partnership that I wrote about. I'm just trying to look up the name of the pro skaters. Guy skates for DC, among others, who organized a public-private partnership in Lyon in France, where he is to put a bunch of skatable objects in. It is intriguing to think about how these things get engineered not into just skate parks, which are shunted off to the side and treated as like baseball diamonds, but rather as elements in public spaces where everyone is invited to interact with them. I'm gonna figure out what the name of this guy is.
We'll put it into the show notes as well, Ben.
This is all coming up Aurelian Giard, and it is not Aurelian Giard. I could be, or Girard rather. I could be wrong about, In any case, having grown up, I grew up skateboarding at the Everson Museum in Syracuse, and there were a bunch of sculptures there that we skated on, not because they were made to be skated in any way at all, but just because they were it was an incidental possibility. And the way you look, I don't know.
That's such a great way of putting it, Ben. Incidental possibility. Also a great hardcore band name.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're playing the 3 p.m. matinee at the Lost Horizon.
By the way, shout out Shelter, who's going to be down in Miami. I'm so excited for this. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, you missed the Gorilla Biscuit show, right? So I
missed it.
shout out Walter, by the way. Well, okay, so incidental possibility. I think that actually is because we're at about the 30-minute mark. That's a good place to leave it off. But man, we got through a lot. We got
We
military
did.
service, Vans, South by Southwest, skateboarding.
I
There
love
we
doing
go.
this, Ben.
This is the Culture Club half hour.
I love doing the half hour. We've got to get Ruba and Jian to join us for the morning show that we're doing here on Wednesdays, which is this becoming. So,
Dude, I love that.
thanks for listening to Culture Club Half Hour. I'm Jeff Carwell with Ben Dees, of course. Be sure to click subscribe and get all of the latest updates from the show. We'd love for you to follow the page as well. More info at cultureclub.show. Ben, enjoy the rest of your day.
Likewise, bud. I'll talk to you soon.
See you.